What up, everyone? It's your boy Reckonable, chillin' and Larry D. We're just welcoming you to a special edition of the tasting menu on maincourse101.com. As a lot of you may or may not know, he's a Japanese producer by the name of Nujabes, otherwise known as Nujabes. He recently passed away February 26th, but the news didn't break until earlier this week. His family kept it very private. And he was a very influential producer. A lot of people consider him to be Japan's version of J Dilla, which is a pretty big title to live up to, and we felt that he definitely did. And I don't want to be blasphemous, but he might have even surpassed it, but that's another debate. But basically this is going to be, we tried to do something a little bit different and do a video blog instead of my traditional tasting menu updates, and just take you through a little bit about a conversation, I guess, about how we felt about his music. Larry, you want to add anything before we get into it?
No doubt, just to be quick, I mean, this is something that we're keeping very broad, and I hope you guys can relate. I guess Nujabes touched people across the world at so many levels, and it's cool from us being from Canada, and for somebody in Japan or China or Africa to feel the same way about his music. So we really hope that you can relate on the same level.
Mm-hmm. And then once we're done, just check out a selection of his tracks at the bottom that I always put up, and yeah, let's just get into it.
Sure.
Peace. So I first heard of Nujabes, I guess it was back in 2004 or 2005. It was around the time that there was a very popular anime called Samurai Champloo, which basically, if you're a hip-hop head, is the anime to watch, other than like Cowboy Bebop or whatever. Like, it basically took, the elements of hip-hop with battling and like b-boying and just the music, and that whole aspect of it, and then taking it into like samurai culture and just very stylistic. But I guess Nujabes was heavily involved in the soundtrack for Samurai Champloo. He had the intro music, the outro music. A lot of the scenes were set to his music. So right away from then, you could tell that he was trying to tell a story with what he was producing. It wasn't just a beat. It was this beat is starting here, but then it's going to end off over here. There's progression throughout all of his music. There's really an emotion that comes with it, and there's a story that's behind it. And I guess that's when I first really got into it. I think I was in second year of university, and I think that was around the same time me and you were on the same page.
Same tip. Yeah, I was in back in, for me, I think it was like 05, 06 as well. Just right when I think he introduced me into the show, and I was like, yeah, this show is dope, because like the characters like were like busting out like b-boy moves, and we both b-boyed, so it was just cool to see something like that in an anime, and but then just the music on top of the artwork was for one, but then the music on top was another thing that really just set the whole storyline together so well. So man, I was hooked when I first heard it.
And it's funny because like you think about anime, and like we've always been into anime. This guy's Asian, and I pretend to be Asian. So
you are Asian, technically.
Anyways, yeah, but like I never really watched an anime for the music before. Like I'd always watch for the action, for whatever. But then you watch Samurai Champloo, and you just get transformed. You get lost really in all the music that's there. So I guess that was like the first exposure I had, and then once I found out that name, Nujabes, it was on, and I guess Google was, our best friend.
It's a plague.
Yeah, wasn't really, I wouldn't call it a plague, but I would call it like, something contagious, but in like a really good feeling, So yeah, that was when I first, got into the music.
So, you know what? His music was it was layered on so many levels. Nujabes was able to take a music where if there would have been horns, or would have been a sample of some real jazzy tune, or like I don't even, really like the music when I heard from him. What I really enjoyed was that he was so original to his style. where like some of the stuff where you heard like either it would be horns from I believe Uyama who's playing the soprano saxophone, or just like I don't know like certain singers, like he just never took music. He always did something fresh, and so that was something that hit me where I was just listening. I'm like, what is he taking this from? Where now a lot of artists nowadays, or even in the past in the 90s, have always been sampling old soul tracks or jazz tunes. But Nujabes was always able to create his own samples where it did sound authentically from that era, from the 60s or whatnot, and to manipulate it to sound like at that time was really just made him a genius.
Mm-hmm. I mean, talking about sampling, and he takes like on his track Counting Stars, he flips that sample so hard, and it's just beautiful music. And then on top of that, it's not even the fact that he's good at sampling or he's technically gifted. It's just the feeling that he created with that music. I felt like for the past few years it was like the soundtrack to my entire life, especially last fall. Like this whole past year, like I started my master's program. I was like, it's a whole new transition, and I feel like his music really set the mood for a lot of my study sessions, a lot of just while I'm driving, while I'm hanging out with friends. I remember having a conversation with my boy TJ, shout out to TJ, and we're talking about, you mentioned Uyama, which was Uyama Hiroto, one of his longtime collaborators. We're listening to a track by him called Waltz for Life, and you notice the story, like I was saying earlier, was the stories that you can imagine in your mind. I remember driving, listening to Waltz for Life, and just feeling like this whole scene play out in my head of this soldier, who's coming home from war, and he's coming home, and everyone's trying to greet all these soldiers, but the war's still going on back wherever it is in. I mean, it's weird, but I'm trying to describe like a story that doesn't even exist. It exists in my mind, but it was that music that created it. So he's coming home, but there's like glory behind coming home from war, and like your whole family's happy, your wife is happy, your kids are happy, but then there's still your colleagues and your fellow soldiers fighting abroad and dying at the same time. And then there's that one wife, whose husband never comes home, and that's like the emotion that I got out of just listening to this song. And it's like, I felt like Nujabes music really did that on like so many different levels, where you could just really zone out to it and appreciate every little element that he played. He used the layers, like it was just second to none. It was amazing.
That's exactly that, and that's the glory of his music, that it painted a storyline as opposed to just playing a track and I'm going to bring in this and that, but he really just painted a full picture, and so capturing some sort of feeling, which was mostly a feel-good vibe, I think, where most people will listen to it and they could be walking home from somewhere. And I remember reading a comment from somebody who wrote on Shingo 2's page about Nujabes and how he was touched by it, how he's like, I'd always just like, coming home from the taxi. He lived in Shanghai and he was taking a taxi home from work, and how that song, just like looking at everything, it's just like completely changes perspective.
Yeah, definitely, like I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's definitely something with Nujabes music, was you could put that on your iPod or whatever, just as long as you have it in your headphones, and walk and go nowhere, just like aimlessly walk around. I remember walking from my house all the way, which is like, I don't want to tell you what my house is, it's the internet, but I remember I walked all the way to like Highway 10 in Eglinton in Mississauga, which gives you an indication of how far I live. That's like a good 40-minute walk, and just listening to his tracks and just like it just makes you think about life and what you want to do, and it just helps you get through a lot of situations. And I felt like his music never really needed lyrics to go on top of it. When they did go on top, they fit really well, but his music alone just stood by itself, and it was just, I know, it took you away, it took you on a journey, and that's really what it was. It was like listening to Nujabes is like going on a long journey. So a lot of people feel like, now that he's gone, what's next? Who's going to carry forward the stories and the legacy of Nujabes? And I feel like that's one thing, that he's got such a large volume and large body of music that even though, he's physically, he's passed away, spiritually he'll always still be here, because we can always put on his music and just listen to it and just feel good to it. But on top of that, there's a lot of artists that he worked with and collaborated with in Japan who really, I feel, they learned a lot from Nujabes and they added a lot to his music. He learned from them, and they're still around to carry on the tradition. So there's Kenichiro Nishihara, he's an amazing artist. There's Yamo Hiroto, who we mentioned before. There's Shingo 2. There's Substantial, the rapper. There's so many people that I feel are going to carry his stuff forward, and I feel like those are names that everyone should get familiar with, because if you haven't heard of Nujabes before, or if you have and you only listen to his stuff and not really the people that worked with him or collaborated with him, you might want to check that stuff out, because his music is really, I feel in the next few years people are going to realize how timeless it was and how much it contributed to hip hop in general, and how, I guess, underrated he was, because a lot of people, I feel, on this side of the ocean don't really know his stuff.
No doubt. And the more people say his genre was an underground rap, or underground hip hop, more type of music, I beg to differ, because the more and more that I start reading online about how big of a fan base that he had, I really thought it was a small niche market. In a way it kind of is, but it was a lot bigger than I thought. And to me, it's not underground at all. It was very above level, and a lot of people knew his music. So to me, just by surprise, just seeing pretty much every YouTube video, every article I read, everything, there was so much love for this man. There was not a bad thing to say at all. And just, I think, at this level of him passing, it's almost, to me, on the level of the legend of like Michael Jackson or James Brown, or to me, I feel like that. And some people might have not heard of his name before, but when you do hear his music and you know how much feeling, which is probably the hardest thing to capture in music, is emotion and feeling, that he did it so well on so many different songs. That's more than enough to show that his legacy and his music was great. And
in closing, before we go, I just wanted to say that one thing that I feel about his legacy and how it's going to be carried on is that the younger generation that listens to his music and that appreciates music is just, it's great to see them pick up on Nujabes and really want to carry it forward and share it with their friends. Specifically, I actually want to give a shout out to Mike Fate V of Ground Illusions crew. I want to give a shout out to Jesse of Ground Illusions crew and Ryan of Ground Illusions crew. Larry and I took those kids on a road trip to Montreal for this B-Boy Battle, the Fresh Format anniversary, a few weeks back, and it was actually the weekend before Nujabes passed away, and that's all we did in the car ride, was listening to Nujabes with these kids, and they were just loving it. And
they knew it already.
They knew it, and they were loving it, and it was just it made me happy to know that there's kids out there that are really looking and trying to find real music, and that they're connecting with it in the same way that we did when we were younger, and as we do as we continue to grow. So, I guess that's all we really have to say.
That's it.
We're gonna let the music speak for itself. There's gonna be no commentary on the tracks down below. Just listen to them, download them, put them on your iPod, and hopefully it's going to expose you to a lot of good music by Nujabes and his fellow musicians. So that's it. Peace.
Main Course 101.